Dear fellow American, we've seen this story before. 2000, 2007, 2018, 2020, and now in 2024, it's back with a vengeance. Only this time, it's not .com stocks, pot stocks, Bitcoin, or U.S. housing. It's artificial intelligence. But make no mistake, it doesn't matter what the mania comes disguised as. The exact same pattern is unfolding, and unless you know what's coming next, you could be wiped out. So if you're thinking of investing in any AI stock, this could be the most important video you watch this year. One that could not only save you from financial catastrophe, but could potentially make you one of the few people who make a killing from today's artificial intelligence mania. You see, while there is no doubt that recent advancements in artificial intelligence are game-changing and will drive colossal innovation in every sector of the economy, there's also no escaping what I call the big AI die-up is coming. Those who ignore the writing on the wall risk seeing their investments plummet in the months to come. Today, you'll discover exactly how the big AI die-up will unfold, how you can prepare for it before it's too late, and how you can also profit from it too. You'll get the names of the stocks to avoid, the companies to buy instead, and where the real money will be made during this imminent die-up. And perhaps most importantly, you'll also learn how to think about this current market so you can avoid the devastating financial mistakes most people are about to make. You see, this isn't the first time in my career that I've helped my subscribers navigate an investment mania. I did it in the late 1990s when we warned that the dot-com bubble was going to burst, while also recommending some of the best stocks of the era. We did it in 2007 when I predicted the housing market was about to implode and recommended shorting shares of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We did it in 2017 when I said that Bitcoin, despite its long-term potential, was in the midst of a full-fledged mania and warned, quote, "My warning is the price action of Bitcoin and other virtual currencies is very dangerous and that most people dramatically overestimate their capacity to tolerate volatility and risk." And we did it in 2018 with pot stocks, writing, "All manias end the same way. Prices eventually reverse, often sharply, and go on to retrace 50 to 80% or more of the entire rally until the last bull finally throws in the towel." Now I'm going to show you how to successfully navigate this new investment mania in artificial intelligence. And as strange as it sounds, the story starts with this 139-year-old map of Wyoming. See those lines crisscrossing the map? They show a disruptive new technology that transformed the U.S. economy and unleashed an unprecedented flood of wealth, turning one 19th century settlement into the richest city in the entire world. Incredibly, the story of this old boomtown on the Great American Plains holds the secret to growing your wealth from 2024's most disruptive new technology, artificial intelligence. In the aftermath of the Civil War, a new gold rush was underway. For decades, the Great Plains had been the domain of the buffalo, and their numbers were seemingly endless. Luc Voorhees, an early settler, wrote that he had traveled 200 miles through a single herd of buffalo. However, as the post-war economy ramped up, demand for buffalo was insatiable. Their hides were used for belts on factory steam engines, water wheels, warm clothing, horse harnesses, and much more. And exterminating buffalo became the unofficial policy of the U.S. government. The Army even gave away free ammunition to buffalo hunters. The newly built Union Pacific Railroad brought thousands of hunters onto the plains, and soon piles of bones like this littered the West. It wasn't long before almost every bison in the United States, more than 20 million animals, had been slaughtered and then replaced by cattle. In the first of the fabled cattle drives, 35,000 head of cattle traveled north from Texas searching for fresh pastures. 75,000 cattle came north the following year. And by 1871, more than 500,000 head of cattle a year were migrating northwards into the plains where the buffalo had roamed not long ago. In the 2 decades following the Civil War, more than 10 million head of cattle migrated onto the northern plains, along with 500,000 horses and 50,000 cowboys. The once deserted Great Plains boomed as new cattle towns popped up all across the West. Ellsworth, Newton, Wichita, Caldwell, Hayes, Dodge City, Hunwell, Miles City. These towns thrived as the value of U.S. meat production soared to $1.4 billion, roughly 20% of America's GDP at the time. Thousands of people settled in these new boom towns with saloons, casinos, shops, dance halls, theaters, and restaurants springing up to cater to the new residents. Soon these cattle towns were the wealthiest places in America, and the most famous of them all was Cheyenne, Wyoming. In just a few years, this cowboy encampment went from a handful of people to more than 3,000 residents. And soon, Cheyenne boasted the highest per capita income in the world. The cattle kings built lavish mansions, threw extravagant parties, and imported the finest clothes and jewels. Cheyenne became the center of the West, with its main street housing an opera house, the Atlas Theater, and the Interocean Hotel. But nothing signified the wealth of this town more than the establishment of the Cheyenne Club. It was designed to surpass the luxuries offered in London's finest social clubs. Sprawling over 3 stories, the Cheyenne Club had rooms for billiards, reading, smoking, dining, and games. It boasted an indoor tennis court, hardwood floors in every room, a wine cellar, and every other extravagance of the time. Champagne from France was served with every meal, and it offered the finest food from around the world, even fresh oysters. All of this prosperity was unlocked by the vast abundance of cattle ranching on the Great Plains. But the cattle trade alone doesn't tell the whole story of how Cheyenne became the wealthiest city in the world. You see, it wasn't only the cowboys and the cattle kings that rebuilt the U.S. economy after the Civil War. And if it wasn't for the invention of one disruptive new technology, this incredible economic boom may never have happened. It's an invention that transformed the natural abundance of the great American plains into an economic engine of unparalleled power. Yet its impact is often forgotten by historians who prefer the romanticized story of intrepid cowboys wrangling cattle on the vast open plains. The reality is, without this one invention, Cheyenne would never have become the wealthiest city in the world. And as strange as it may seem, this map and the story it tells holds the key to safely navigating and profiting from the 2024 AI boom. Let me show you how. My name, by the way, is Porter Stansberry. About 3 decades ago, I started a financial research firm with nothing to my name but a borrowed laptop, working from the kitchen table of my 3rd-floor apartment in one of Baltimore's most notorious neighborhoods. I wrote about the disruptions, the opportunities, and the risks I saw in the financial markets. I had no right to do this. I wasn't a stockbroker or even a financial analyst. I'd never worked for an investment bank or on Wall Street. And beyond having access to the SEC's database of financial statements and annual reports, I had no special insights into corporate America. But from that first report, published in the late 1990s, my firm would grow into one of the world's largest financial research companies. And while you may not have heard of me or my firm, for almost 30 years, we've been on the frontier of the financial markets, accurately predicting many of the world's most important economic stories. The 1997 emerging market collapse, the Japanese '98 banking crisis, the dot-com blow-ups of the 2000s, the demise of General Electric, the bankruptcy of General Motors, and the 2008 financial crisis, along with the fall of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We warned about all of these catastrophes and many others long before Wall Street or the mainstream financial media. That's why our research has been featured by almost every major media outlet, read by presidential advisors, leading economists, and even reportedly once landed on Warren Buffett's desk. Along the way, we also predicted the rise of many of the world's leading tech companies, including Apple, Amazon, Nvidia, and Microsoft. But the reason I'm here today is that a powerful financial event is looming. And unless you prepare immediately, you could see your portfolio wiped out, as this event sends shockwaves throughout the markets. I believe losses of 50% or more could be coming to this sector, yet nobody is warning you. In fact, almost everyone is spurring this force on. The mainstream media, the financial press, and investment pundits are all dumping gasoline on the fire. They're telling you to buy every tech stock, invest in every harebrained artificial intelligence company, and that fortunes will be made by everyone who gets in now. To my knowledge, I'm the only financial analyst stepping forward to warn you of what's actually coming and why, unless you prepare accordingly, you could see your portfolio decimated by what I call the big AI die-up. But to understand the danger this force poses, what will happen next, and how you can protect your wealth and grow it, we must return to the Old West, where the first big die-up occurred. In the 19th century, one new technology transformed America's Great Plains and its economy, a radical new invention that helped ignite the U.S. cattle boom. What was it? Barbed wire. Invented by 3 farmers at a county fair in DeKalb, Illinois, barbed wire transformed the ranching industry forever. Before its invention, animals roamed freely. Ranchers couldn't afford to fence in their herds or define their property boundaries. The only real option was wooden fencing, but wood was really scarce on the Great Plains and had to be brought in on rail cars. It was expensive, labor-intensive to erect, and was easily damaged by herds of cattle. Barbed wire solved these problems, and by doing so, unlocked huge productivity gains in ranching. The new low-cost barbed wire fences allowed ranchers to define their property, allowed them to contain their herd to a specific plot of land, and helped them protect cattle from the dangers of the open plains. The result was a colossal 80% reduction in annual bull mortality. But that's not all. Barbed wire fences also meant breeding could be accelerated. Access to the best grasslands and watering holes could be controlled. Cattle couldn't escape, and rustlers couldn't steal animals as easily. It also reduced ranchers' need for cowboys to watch over the herds. Instead of roaming the vast plains, ranchers could keep their cattle contained, control their movements and diet, and better care for the animals. This simultaneously reduced the cost of ranching while also boosting the productivity of ranching. It's why historians point to barbed wire as the catalyst that ended the open-range cowboy lifestyle and revolutionized beef agriculture. The economics were obvious. The bigger the ranch, the greater returns from barbed wire fencing. So demand for both ranch land and steel soared. The following frenzy will be familiar to anyone who remembers the internet bubble of the 1990s, the housing boom of the early 2000s, or the altcoin boom in 2020. Seemingly endless demand for beef, amplified by the possibilities of barbed wire, created the impression of a can't-lose investment. Fortunes poured into ranching, with many of the country's wealthiest people getting swept up in the mania. People like Marshall Field, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Flaglers, the Whitneys, the Seligmans, the Ameses, the list goes on. And the frenzy wasn't contained to America either. Imported American beef rapidly began to replace British beef as the premium meat in England. In 1876, England imported just 1,700 tons of fresh beef. But 2 years later, imports surged to more than 30,000 tons, with 80% coming from the United States. As demand for U.S. beef skyrocketed, the wealth of the cattle kings exploded. Scottish-born ranch manager John Clay wrote that raising a steer cost about $1.50, but you could sell it for as much as $60, an outlandish markup of over 4,000%. Soon, rumors about the success of America's cattle ranches and the wealth that was up for grabs became the talk of London. In fact, the British Parliament sent 2 members, Clare Reid and Albert Pell, to the American West to explore opportunities. What they reported back launched the greatest investment mania the world had ever seen, and the first genuinely global investment mania. Reid and Pell wrote, quote, "The acknowledged profits upon capital invested in cattle are 25% to 33% per year. Based on that report, capital flooded from Great Britain to America. Between 1879 and 1888, the British formed 36 new companies and raised $45 million to invest in cattle, an amount of capital that was equal to about 5% of British GDP. A comparably sized investment would equal $150 billion today. But it rarely ends well, where an exciting new industry meets a flood of capital from investors who are willing to pay almost any price to get in. Bubbles attract pens. The winner of 1886-1887 was the pen for the cattle bubble. No one had ever seen anything like it. In January, the snow started falling and it didn't stop for 10 days straight. The temperature plunged to minus 60 degrees, the coldest winter ever on record in Wyoming. There was so much snow and so little grass, the cows who didn't freeze to death starved to death waiting for spring to arrive. When spring finally came, hardly any cows were left. More than 1 million head of cattle had perished over the winter. The cowboys called it the Big Die-Up. It wiped out virtually every large cattle ranch in the West. As Christopher Knowlton, author of Cattle Kingdom, writes, the deadly winter proceeded, almost biblical in its ferocity and duration, as though it had every intention of humbling and shaming anyone who had participated in the great cattle boom. The Big Die-Up slashed the number of large cattle companies in Colorado from 58 to 9. In most cases, investors in the cattle boom lost 100%, everything. Investors from Boston poured $2 million, that's roughly $6 billion in today's money, into the Union Cattle Company in 1883. At its peak, the ranch held 60,000 head of cattle and paid an annual 8% dividend. But after the Big Die-Up, it went bust. Same with the Swan Land and Cattle Company, a joint stock company founded in Scotland in 1883 with $3 million in capital. That's almost $10 billion in today's money. Swan was the largest ranch in the West, a ranch the size of Connecticut, but it went under in the Big Die-Up and investors lost everything. Perhaps the most famous victim of the cattle bubble was 28-year-old Theodore Roosevelt, fleeing the grief of losing his mother and his first wife on the same day. Roosevelt moved to the Dakota Territory and established the Elkhorn Ranch. He invested most of his family's wealth, about $80,000, or $250 million in today's money, into cattle, with disastrous results. The Big Die-Up wiped out his ranch, and as Roosevelt wrote to his sister, I wish I was sure I would lose no more than half the money I invested out here. When all was said and done, Roosevelt lost 75% of his herd and virtually all of his money. The cattle boom of the 19th century was the first genuine global investment mania. A new technology, barbed wire, converted the incredible abundance of the Great Plains into an enormous economic engine for beef, and the demand was believed to be unlimited. But barbed wire was useless to keep out the snow. And in a story that's all too familiar, investors caught up in the frenzy lost almost everything. The desire for quick and easy riches overrode any sober analysis of whether the market could sustain this type of growth or potential risks. As more and more investors poured in more and more money, the bubble continued to grow until eventually it ended. Time and time again, investors get caught in the same trap. The South Sea bubble, the railway mania, the dot-com boom, the 2000 housing bubble, pot stocks. History is replete with examples of what happens when a disruptive technology and the promise of market disruption meet excess capital. As Warren Buffett has explained, a pen lies in wait for every bubble. When the two eventually meet, a new wave of investors learns some very old lessons. First, many on Wall Street will sell investors anything they will buy. Second, speculation is the most dangerous when it looks easiest. This brings us to artificial intelligence. Recent advancements in AI have catapulted the investment community into an unbridled frenzy of starry-eyed optimism. The New York Times raves that AI could add $4.4 trillion to the global economy. Politicians, pundits, the media, everyone says AI is going to change everything. Search volume for AI has gone stratospheric, and artificial intelligence is now talked about by the media as much as Bitcoin was during its all-time high run in 2021. Like all manias, unbridled faith in the future and fear of missing out is all it takes for investors to invest vast sums of capital. Consider the case of Mobius AI, a new startup founded last year by 4 former Google researchers. According to the New York Times, the founders weren't sure what their product might be, just that it would involve AI technology that could generate its own photos and videos. Not having a product wasn't enough to stop two of the top venture capital firms in the country from funding the business at a $100 million valuation. And this isn't an outlier. PitchBook reports that venture capitalists have increased their AI positions $408 million to $4.5 billion over the last 5 years. Angel and seed deals have grown too, with 107 new seed deals and $358.3 million invested in 2022, compared with just 41 deals and $102 million in 2018. AI-oriented ETF fund inflows have surged by 30%, with retail investors dumping millions into the sector. The investment mania around AI is so frenzied that it is effectively fueling the current stock market rally. Just 7 tech firms in the S&P 500 are responsible for almost all of the returns this year, with the remaining 493 companies basically flat. And then a story almost identical to the dot-com and crypto bubbles, earnings calls for the largest tech companies have seen 190 mentions of AI versus only 36 a year ago. As analysts for TAM Asset Management report, quote, companies that mention the word AI in their earnings are seeing boosts to their share price, and that smells very much like the dot-com era. Take BuzzFeed, for example. The near-bankrupt media firm announced they would replace their worthless human-generated content with worthless AI-generated content, and the stock tripled overnight. The same happened to BigBear.ai, which skyrocketed by over 600% in just 1 month. Or software firm C3.ai. It surged 252% last year. And then, of course, there's Nvidia, a company my partners and I first recommended back in 2016. As the leading architect of computer chips, Nvidia is on the frontier of the artificial intelligence market. Their chips power 95% of the world's top AI systems, including ChatGPT, and they have a virtual monopoly on the market. With the frenzy around AI going mainstream, Nvidia stock has gone vertical. It's now trading at 36 times revenues and 74 times earnings. To put this in context and give you an idea of what could be coming for Nvidia, here's what Sun Microsystems, the one-time dot-com darling, CEO said about high multiple stocks. Quote, at 10 times revenues, to give you a 10-year payback, I have to pay you 100% of revenues for 10 straight years in dividends. That assumes I can get that by my shareholders. That assumes I have zero cost of goods sold, which is very hard for a computer company. That assumes zero expenses, which is really hard with 39,000 employees. That assumes I pay no taxes, which is very hard. And that assumes you pay no taxes on your dividends, which is kind of illegal. And that assumes with zero R&D for the next 10 years, I can maintain the current revenue run rate. Do you realize how ridiculous those basic assumptions are? You don't need any transparency. You don't need any footnotes. What were you thinking? It was the same story with Cisco. Cisco was the Nvidia equivalent of the dot-com era. It was the leading provider of networking infrastructure, routers. No competitor came close to its dominance, with roughly 75% of all the internet traffic going through their equipment. From its February 1990 IPO through to the year 2000, Cisco's shares compounded at an incredible 102% per year. At its peak, Cisco was the largest company in the entire world, valued at over $500 billion, roughly 60 times sales. It continued growing, with revenues more than tripling from $12 billion to $40 billion by 2010, growing roughly 10% per year. The problem was that this was a significant deceleration from the 40% average growth rate from 95 to 2000. As competition sprang up, Cisco gradually ceded market share, going from 75% in 2000 to only 55% today. Meanwhile, growth for internet networking equipment slowed as the market matured. However, when you're valued at 60 times sales, you can't afford even a modest growth slowdown. Despite revenues growing fourfold since 2000, Cisco investors have suffered 2 decades of negative returns. Like Cisco in the dot-com era, Nvidia is now priced for perfection. It must continue to grow and execute flawlessly to maintain its current valuation. Anything less than perfection will likely lead to huge losses for investors. It's the same story for the other AI-related firms, Microsoft and Adobe, Atlassian, Palantir, C3, Snowflake, to name a few. Betting on perfection is a fool's errand in any environment, but it's especially hazardous in today's uncertain market. Despite this, investors fueled by fear of missing out and dreams of riches continue to pour money into Nvidia and other AI firms. That's the problem with bubbles, and that's what makes them so hard to resist. There is always some truth behind the hype. The dot-com bubble birthed the internet. The mobile bubble birthed the iPhone. The crypto bubble birthed Bitcoin. And there's zero doubt in my mind that artificial intelligence will also eventually birth many disruptive new products and unleash massive wealth over the long term. But before that happens, the bubble will pop. There will be a mass extinction event, a big die-up, and only a few businesses will make it to the other side. Consider the crypto market, where literally thousands of projects that promise to revolutionize industries and be the next big thing have crashed to zero. Or the dot-com bubble, when hundreds of tech firms held IPOs each year, almost all of which went bankrupt when the bubble burst. And even many of the survivors still trade well below their highs. Intel, almost 60% below dot-com peak. Cisco, almost 40% below dot-com peak. And Sun Microsystems, it sold for 97% below its dot-com peak. Even Microsoft only fell 75% from its peak. It took 17 years to surpass its dot-com highs. That's almost 2 decades of flat or negative returns. So although Nvidia will likely remain one of the dominant players in the artificial intelligence market, in order to make a sizable return on your investment now, Nvidia needs to execute flawlessly for years and years to come. History tells us this is unlikely, and I believe investors caught up in the hype of AI will see catastrophic losses when the bubble eventually pops. Remember, when the dot-com bubble burst, the NASDAQ plunged 77%. Blue chip darlings like Sun Microsystems collapsed by 90% or more. Hundreds of one-time hot stocks vanished altogether. Remember Pets.com, Webvan, eToys, remember Boo or Cosmo? The list of revolutionary companies that went bust is almost endless. When all was said and done, the wealth of an entire generation of over-eager investors was decimated. And it's the same story with every bubble. You can be directionally right. You can be correct in your analysis that a technology is going to change the world. But the price you pay matters. Even the best businesses in the world can be terrible investments if you pay too much. Right now, millions of investors are rushing into grossly overvalued artificial intelligence and tech stocks that have almost zero chance of maintaining their current value. So unless you can weather a 50% or more decline in your investment and can afford to wait 10 years or more for the bet to pay off, then I would urge you not to invest in overhyped artificial intelligence firms. Remember, it was a freak snowstorm that decimated the cattle speculators in the 1880s. For Nvidia, the threats range from competitors encroaching on its market share to a global recession to a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, an event that could wipe out 25% of Nvidia's business overnight. Forecasting the future competitive landscape of an emergent technology or pricing in geopolitical risk is really difficult. In order to justify these current tech valuations, investors must grapple with a series of highly uncertain future scenarios. And as I've shown you, the risks are not worth taking, especially when there are far superior investment opportunities available today. You see, while AI and tech firms are grossly overvalued, there is one undervalued and overlooked company that you should know about. While it's not an artificial intelligence company, I believe it will end up being one of the most important companies to the future of AI. It's a company that the entire industry needs in order to survive. Even as the big die-up happens and the mainstream AI stocks collapse, this company will continue to thrive and emerge from the ashes stronger and more dominant than ever before. All the stories you've seen about AI, they've likely focused on the companies creating and training the artificial intelligence models like OpenAI, Google, and IBM, or the companies manufacturing the computer chips that these AI systems run on, from Nvidia, Intel, and AMD. And over the past year, investors have dumped billions of dollars into these stocks in an attempt to capitalize on the AI frenzy. But as you've seen today, there's a far bigger story unfolding, one that nobody on Wall Street or in the financial media is telling you about. It's the story of the AI keystone, the only energy source that can sustainably meet the insatiable power demands of artificial intelligence. Just one pellet of the AI keystone, about the size of your fingertip, can produce the same amount of energy as 1 ton of coal, 149 gallons of oil, 17,000 cubic square feet of gas, or over 7,000 solar panels, all while producing zero emissions. I'm talking, as you might have guessed, about uranium. However, uranium and nuclear energy alone aren't the answer to the energy demands of artificial intelligence. That's why I'm not telling you to rush out and buy uranium, mining stocks, or even a nuclear energy ETF. You see, despite uranium and nuclear energy's resurgence in popularity, it's not enough to solve AI's energy needs alone. Because without the technology that will bridge the gap between nuclear energy and AI, progress and innovation won't happen. It takes years and tens of billions of dollars to build a single nuclear power plant. After decades of propaganda about the evils of nuclear energy, the U.S. has fallen far behind our geopolitical rivals in nuclear technology. Since 2017, Russia and China have accounted for 87% of newly installed nuclear reactors worldwide. And by 2030, China is projected to be the world's leading nuclear power producer. At the same time, we've built one. Just one. It's pathetic. But now, with the green energy delusion collapsing and many politicians coming to the realization that wind and solar cannot replace fossil fuels, the radical climate activists have finally come to the conclusion that only nuclear power can meet the world's growing energy demands. That's why over the last 12 months, we've seen a complete 180-degree turn in how the progressives view nuclear power. Even the high priestess of climate change, Greta Thunberg, is embracing nuclear after previously calling it extremely dangerous, expensive, and time-consuming. It's not just the activists either. The U.S. Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, a radical who makes insane music videos about ending fossil fuels, has come to admit, quote, "The future of nuclear energy is here and should be protected." Now, the government is moving to adopt nuclear power and recently passed the ADVANCE Act. Its stated mission is to boost development and deployment of new nuclear technologies, incentivize expansion in America, and help position the U.S. as the world's leader in nuclear energy. Miraculously, this is one of the only bills to recently make it through the Senate with bipartisan support, which highlights the importance of nuclear energy, not just for the future of AI, but for our country. In fact, the U.S. Department of Energy recently went so far as to say, nuclear power is intrinsically tied to national security. While it's refreshing to see D.C. pass legislation that's grounded in reality and that will benefit the country, there's a problem. After decades of negative attention and pressure from the mainstream media, the U.S. has been closing nuclear power plants. In 1998, the number of operating reactors declined to 104 and remained there through 2013. When the number then declined even further to 92 in 2022. On top of that, nuclear power has only provided 20% of total annual U.S. electricity generation from 1990 through 2021. That's 31 years of stagnation. In fact, Plant Vogtle in Waynesboro, Georgia, will be America's first new nuclear plant since the 1990s. What's the catch? Well, it took 15 years to build, and it cost more than $30 billion. Don't get me wrong, this is a massive milestone for Waynesboro and the country. The plant is projected to power 500,000 homes and businesses for the next 60 to 80 years. But the plant's story exposes a brutal reality. Building nuclear power plants is expensive, time-consuming, and complicated. Just take Bill Gates' nuclear company as an example. Started in 2006, TerraPower has yet to produce any nuclear power for the private or public sector. That's 17 years with hardly anything to show for it. But in the world of nuclear energy, Gates isn't alone in failure. According to the World Nuclear Industry Status Report, the average time to construct a nuclear power plant is 10 years. This means traditional nuclear power plants will be unable to meet the exponentially growing energy demands of the AI sector. It will take decades for the U.S. to build out the necessary infrastructure. But thanks to a single decision on February 21st last year, a new type of nuclear energy will be able to provide practically endless clean energy all across the country. For the first time in history, nuclear energy has become scalable. A new technology was recently approved by the U.S. government, and it's this technology that will act as the keystone for AI. It enables AI companies to use nuclear energy easily, quickly, and without spending years and billions of dollars to develop power plants. It's a revolutionary new technology that allows us to build hundreds, if not thousands, of nuclear facilities all across the country, and at a fraction of the historic cost and time. To say this is a historic development would be an understatement. This is a generational achievement that, according to former presidential advisor David Durham, is a game-changing technology. So what is this technology that I believe will be the keystone of AI? The answer lies in this photo from 1963. It's a nuclear power plant named after a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, Enrico Fermi. Fermi was one of the greatest geniuses of the last 100 years and is considered the father of nuclear power. As you can see, the Fermi reactor is very different from a typical nuclear reactor. That's because it was the world's first small modular nuclear reactor, something that's known as SMR. As the name implies, an SMR is a nuclear reactor that produces nuclear energy but is much smaller than a typical reactor. That means it has all of the advantages of a nuclear reactor with almost none of the disadvantages. It can produce electricity with less overheating, it can self-regulate, it can be paired with renewable resources, it can be built in only 2 years, it can be deployed on top of shuttered coal plants, of which we have about 300 of in America right now. In fact, that is what Bill Gates' nuclear company, TerraPower, has done. They've staked their claim at the site of a retired coal plant. And an SMR can produce energy for 10 years without being refueled, whereas a typical reactor has to be refueled every 18 to 24 months. This is why, as our energy needs continue to surge, SMRs are gaining the attention of governments around the world. They know green energy can't meet the demands, so hundreds of billions of dollars are pouring into the development of SMRs. Right now, 80 different SMR designs are being developed in 19 different countries. 3 have already begun operating. Others will soon follow. And when they do, the world will never be the same again. For the first time ever, we will be able to provide nuclear energy to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And we'll be able to do it without having to spend billions of dollars on reactors that take a decade to build. This is why small nuclear reactors are the keystone technology to the entire AI industry. It's the only way tech companies can meet the energy demands of artificial intelligence without fossil fuels. Mark my words. In 5, 10, even 15 years from now, when we're looking back on the craze of the AI boom, the top investments won't be the company with the best artificial intelligence. No. The real winners will be those who master the SMR. Consider Sam Altman's SMR startup, Oklo. He plans to take it public for upwards of $500 million. Why? Well, in his own words, if the use of artificial intelligence scales up, it will demand a lot of energy. I don't see a way for us to get there without nuclear. And that's why he not only serves as the chairman of Oklo, the startup working to commercialize nuclear fission with microreactors, he's also invested $375 million in Helion. That's right, another nuclear company, marking the biggest investment he's ever made. Helion is a nuclear energy startup working on systems that are smaller, a lot faster to build, and get to commercially useful electricity as soon as possible. It doesn't stop with him. In addition to Oklo, a number of other companies are working on new breeds of advanced microreactors. Companies like GE, Hitachi, Holtec, Kairos Power, NewScale Power, TerraPower, and X Energy. However, despite the potential of these companies, I don't recommend you go near them. You see, there is one major roadblock each of them faces: the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. And like every government organization, they are doing their best to stifle innovation, slow progress, and police the industry. Case in point, in November 2022, the NRC denied without prejudice Oklo's application to build and operate the company's Aurora microreactor in Idaho. What was the problem? Failure to provide information on several key topics. Vague, confusing, and totally unhelpful. Classic bureaucrats. Bill Gates' company, TerraPower, hasn't even submitted an application yet. It turns out no one's been able to design an SMR that meets the strict criteria of the NRC. Well, until now. Pictured here is Voyager 12. In 2023, it became the first ever SMR design to gain regulatory approval by the U.S. government. This means it has been cleared for use in the United States. Developed by a company called NewScale Power, the Voyager 12 can generate 924 megawatts of electricity on only 70 acres of land. To put this into context, you would need over 2,600 acres of land to generate the same amount of power using solar panels, and almost 19,000 acres of land to generate the same amount of power using wind turbines. But just so we're all on the same page, I'm not telling you to buy shares of NewScale Power. You'll likely hear a lot about this company over the next several months, and I'm sure a lot of people will tell you to invest in it because the story of NewScale is incredible. It is enough to whet any investor's appetite. It's a small business out of Portland with less than 500 employees that has been approved to build small nuclear reactors that could provide clean energy to millions of people. The problem is, NewScale doesn't have any money. According to analysts, they only have 15 months left of cash to finance their operations. And until they get the funding they need to build SMRs, we're still many years away from seeing them become a profitable enterprise. Until that day comes, I wouldn't suggest you buy the stock. In fact, the share price is down about 75% over the last year. There's also a far better company than NewScale in the space. You see, while NewScale may be the first company to get the government's stamp of approval for building SMRs, another company is actually building one right now in real time, and it's already got the backing of our government. This facility is where a new type of small reactor called a microreactor is being built. That's right, it's the same type of small nuclear reactor that Sam Altman's company is attempting to build, except this company has the first one in America. And what's most exciting is that this one company isn't some speculative private startup trying to get off the ground. It's already a publicly traded company with a pipeline of multi-billion-dollar nuclear contracts with the U.S. government, big pharma companies, and major utility providers. In doing so, this company has strategically locked in their future revenues for years to come. I believe all but guaranteed their position as the dominant firm providing nuclear energy to America. As the former Bureau of Labor Statistics economist says, this company's future is tied to the future of nuclear power, both military and civilian. And this guy doesn't work for the company, but he knows just as I do that this company is the sole manufacturer of nuclear reactors for U.S. military aircraft carriers and submarines. It's one of the only two providers licensed to store and process uranium for those reactors, has a near lock on supplying the Navy with critical nuclear parts, and delivers almost all of the mechanical equipment for the Navy's nuclear platforms. More importantly, he knows that this company is already building microreactors for the U.S. military. And as the sole manufacturer of nuclear reactors for the military, I think this company has an unbeatable advantage. Their multi-decade government-funded contracts also give them little exposure to swings in the real economy. So while the other nuclear companies like NewScale, TerraPower, and Oklo are subject to interest rates and investor sentiment and other external forces, this company has their revenues locked in and funded for years to come. I believe the emergence of small nuclear reactors and microreactors in particular is the biggest development in energy since fracking hit the oil market. It's something Morgan Stanley believes will bring about a nuclear revival in America. And now that the first SMR has finally been approved for use by the U.S. government, these reactors are no longer hypothetical, they're reality. I believe they're going to make nuclear energy the dominant form of clean energy in America within my lifetime. And as I've shown you today, I believe these SMRs will play an absolutely critical role in the future of artificial intelligence. Of course, I could be wrong. All new technologies and investments carry risk, and I'm not suggesting you invest in this company. My goal is simply to provide you with the research my firm has carried out. Because as you've seen today, we believe SMRs are the only viable energy source that can meet the ravenous power demands of widespread AI in a clean, emission-free manner. And while there are no guarantees, I believe this military-backed SMR manufacturer could be among the most important companies in the ongoing AI revolution. And that's why I want to give you access to my firm's report about the company. It's called the AI Keystone. It reveals everything you need to know about the nuclear revolution that I believe will not only fuel the AI markets, but could also revive our entire nation. Inside this briefing, you'll discover how nuclear energy works and why it is safer, cleaner, and more effective than any other form of energy we have on Earth. You'll get a detailed look at the history of SMRs and microreactors in particular. You'll see how one company has come to be the sole supplier of nuclear reactors for the military. You'll discover why I believe nuclear energy is the keystone technology to the AI market and the critical role it plays. Of course, there's much more in the report. Typically, for access to my firm's research, you would need to pay $14.25 per year upfront. And while we have more than 10,000 subscribers, we are aware that our work is out of reach for some investors. And frankly, that's fine. Our research isn't for everyone, and we do cater to a group of elite investors. Our members include NASA scientists, hedge fund managers, venture capitalists, billionaires, private equity managers, bank presidents, private wealth managers, folks who have a lot of money at stake in the markets. However, the story I've told you about today is so important and so lucrative that I believe that everybody should have access. And that's why I've set up a new initiative that will allow far more people access to my firm's research without the significant upfront cost. There couldn't be a better time for us to launch this new initiative, because now that we have a government-authorized technology that makes it possible to deliver nuclear energy to anyone, anywhere, at any time, the biggest problem with nuclear power has been solved, and I believe the industry is about to see a period of unprecedented resurgence. I'm not the only one saying this. There's an MIT nuclear scientist who calls microreactors transformative. There's an award-winning nuclear engineer, Caleb Brooks, who says they could have a future in decarbonizing the energy landscape in the U.S. There's another award-winning PhD engineer, Jane Allen, who feels that microreactors are going to revolutionize the way we think about energy. Guys with credentials like these, they don't hype things up for no reason. They know that nuclear energy is going to solve America's energy crisis. And as you've seen for yourself, so do America's billionaires. Bezos has invested over $100 million in nuclear technology. Altman's put in $375 million. Herbert Perodo has invested $208 million into small nuclear reactors. And now, so has the U.S. government. The Department of Defense has pledged to invest $1.2 billion in nuclear technology, and they plan on investing another $5.5 billion over the next decade too. This briefing into the leading SMR company is just one of the opportunities I want to get into your hands today. There's also a number of other incredible stories that are essential for anyone who is looking to safely invest in the AI boom. The other briefing I want you to read right away is probably the most important that my team here at Porter & Company has ever written. It's called The AI Illusion, and it exposes a truth about the AI markets. You see, as I said earlier, while recent developments in large language models, neural networks, and generative AI are phenomenal, The truth about AI has been grossly misrepresented to you by the mainstream media, the financial press, and Wall Street. In an effort to capitalize on the frenzy around artificial intelligence, many companies and pundits have lied to you. They're doing it, of course, to drum up new investment, to inflate their valuations, generate media attention, and enrich themselves. And unless you know what's really going on, you could see your investment portfolio decimated in the months ahead. What you'll discover inside the AI illusion will contradict everything you've been told by the mainstream media over the last 12 months. You'll get a real and unflinching view into what's happening in the artificial intelligence markets, why much of what you're being told is a lie, and how you can see through the hype. My analysts and I detail the sector in a way you've never seen before. We analyze the current market and all the key companies in it, but with a sober and unbiased view that cuts through the hype and misinformation that is leading a lot of investors down a dangerous path. We detail the companies you must avoid at all costs, along with the companies that could benefit the most from AI over the long run. These are not the typical AI companies you see other analysts or Wall Street talking about. Instead, they're companies that are quietly applying artificial intelligence to grow their already exceptional businesses. There are 3 companies in particular I want you to know about, and along with your copy of Artificial Illusion, I'd like to send you our research analysis of each. The first is a fintech company that's on its way to becoming $1 trillion powerhouse. It's the undisputed leader in its field thanks to recent advancements in AI. The second will surprise you. It's a cosmetics firm whose proprietary algorithm has enabled them to grow their earnings nearly every year for the last decade. The third is an equipment manufacturer. It's not even a tech stock, but believe it or not, this company and AI may end up saving the world 20 years from now. Nobody else, whether it's the mainstream press, investment banks, Wall Street firms, or independent financial publishers, is telling you this story. If you have any exposure to any tech stock right now, you must read the special AI Illusion briefing immediately. And as I mentioned earlier, to ensure this research is something everyone can benefit from, my firm has launched a new initiative, and here's what you need to know. Typically, a subscription to my advisory costs $1,425 a year. I don't want the price of my firm's research to be a barrier. So while it's only our members who will get ongoing updates and our buy and sell recommendations, I want everyone to know more about these companies. That's why instead of investing $1,425 for access to our financial research services, you can get access to these briefings for just one payment of $199. That's an 89% discount, a savings of more than $1,200. And that's all you'll ever have to pay. There's no ongoing fees, no annual subscriptions, nothing. But let me be blunt. We invest millions of dollars per year in our research, and giving it away for so little is not typically how we operate. That's why I suggest you take advantage of the special offer while it's still available. All you have to do is click the button below now. You'll be taken to a secure, encrypted webpage where you can review everything waiting for you and take advantage of this special offer. In addition to your special research reports, I'll also add you to the complimentary version of my financial newsletter, The Big Secret on Wall Street. As a complimentary reader, you'll receive a weekly email from my team with a redacted version of The Big Secret on Wall Street. Each week you'll get a briefing exploring the most important yet often overlooked factors influencing the markets. And I'll bet you that even our complimentary research far exceeds anything else that you pay for. Of course, if you choose to upgrade to our paid membership, we'd love to have you, but it is not essential, and unlike other publishers, we won't bombard you with endless marketing. In fact, we rarely advertise at all. You see, we know the quality of our work is so incredible that the right people will upgrade when and if they're ready. If not, there's no hard feelings. We'll still serve you with the complimentary version of The Big Secret on Wall Street for as long as you'd like. Now, as I said before, membership has historically cost $14.25 per year. But given the importance of today's message, we've set up an exclusive deal for you. All the details are clearly laid out on the next page. To get started, simply click the button below this video. Or if you prefer, you can call my office to discuss the offer. The number is on the next page for you, and my team will be happy to talk to you and answer any questions you have. Click the button below, and you'll be taken to an encrypted web page where you can review everything that's waiting for you and secure your spot. Finally, I want to say thank you very much for being with me here today, and thanks for watching. Whether or not you decide to join us is your choice, but I really hope I'll see you inside.